Educators, have you ever found yourself standing in a classroom uncertain of what your internal reaction is, but feeling like you can't focus on what's happening because of what your internal world is telling you? I'm Caroline Poland from Poland & Associates Consulting, and today I'm going to talk a little bit about the window of tolerance and educational settings. So first of all, I have several strategies for you, the educator, in utilizing the window of tolerance for yourself as an educator in the classroom. My first strategy is to identify where you typically idle at. Where is just kind of your baseline within that window of tolerance? Are you up in hyperarousal most of the time? Or do you live kind of in a shut down, disconnected, hypoarousal state? Or are you within that window of tolerance where an activating event occurs and you can get a little bit activated and regulate and bring yourself back down again? It's really important to understand where we idle at and what our baseline is so that we can recognize when we start to increase or decrease off of that. And understanding and being that curious observer and noticer for yourself as an educator is really important because we can't change what we don't know. So where do you idle at? My second strategy is to look at what serves as activating events for you. Now, this could be in several different categories because when we walk into the classroom, the rest of our world doesn't cease to exist. So that could be an activating event outside of the classroom, maybe a fight with a family member on the way to work, or an unsettled morning with our own kids, or something that's happening at an administration-wide level, and certainly then what's happening for activating events in the classroom. So we want to look at what serve as activating events. What are the thoughts or the feelings or the actions of other people that serve as activating events for us? Being able to be a curious observer and noticer of yourself will allow you to recognize what events serve as activators for you, and then you'll be able to do something about it. My third strategy is to proactively create a plan for yourself for what you'll do when you get outside of that window of tolerance. It's not about if you'll get outside of that window of tolerance, but it's about when you'll get outside of it, because as humans, we will all get outside of our window of tolerance from time to time. So what will you do when you hit hyperarousal, and what will you do when you hit hypoarousal, and how will you bring yourself back into that regulated window of tolerance where you can face those hard things and be activated but regulate yourself through them? So again, this takes proactive planning and practicing, and I have a 3-part video series on strategies to widen your window of tolerance. So that will include many different options for you there that you can go, and I will link that below. And those are just strategies that you can use. But to create a proactive plan and then practice those things before you actually need them will be really helpful. Now, within the classroom, you're going to have to get a little bit creative in what to do because obviously you have a room full of students and maybe you are in the middle of teaching a lesson when you're activated and you can't stop. And so some of these strategies that I talk about in the Widening the Window of Tolerance series will actually include ways that you can regulate while you're in front of other people. So make sure that you plan for a variety of different situations and scenarios so that you're prepared. And then my 4th strategy is to regularly practice and engage in activities that widen that window of tolerance. We can't just expect something to work without practicing it in the moment. That's why we give math time tests, why we practice handwriting, why we study for exams. We can't just expect something to work or to know something without having built up that muscle. And so by you actively and proactively using different strategies to widen that window of tolerance, this will actually help you to create a protective buffer against compassion fatigue and burnout and secondary traumatic stress. Remember that burnout happens when our perceived demands don't meet our perceived resources, and certainly that can happen within the educational setting. So let's get really creative about what our resources are. And resources resources might come internally. And so what are those proactive resources and strategies that you can build up that will help you meet the perceived demands or actual demands that you have within the classroom? So these are several strategies that you can use for yourself as an educator to utilize the window of tolerance within the classroom and within your overall health to increase compassion satisfaction and to decrease your likelihood that you will hit compassion fatigue. You can follow me on Facebook and Instagram at Poland and Associates, and my website polandandassociates.com, and subscribe to this channel so that you don't miss out on future videos.